Hello. Recently, I came across two videos on YouTube, both from the United States, and one was dated 2017, the other I think it was 2018. But basically, I think they're good examples of how some inmates can be rehabilitated and some can't. Now, crime and justice is a subject I've got very strong views on. I've made no secret of that. I absolutely have no problem admitting that I'm socially conservative on the subject. Basically, I believe that people who hurt society, particularly crimes against a person, that is premeditated murder, GBH, child kidnapping, home invasion, rape, these sort of very destructive, life-changing crimes, I think that the offenders who commit those sort of crimes absolutely should face consequences. And I think that if you accept that there should be consequences, then you believe in judicial punishment, whether you admit it or not. I've seen some attitudes, mostly I have to say from the left, that punishment is futile. Punishment is just a tough word. But if you accept that there shouldn't be penal abolition, because that would be reckless, it would mean just freeing dangerous people. If you believe that there should be prison, but let's say there should be penal reform, you still believe in a form of judicial punishment. And I do not understand the mindset that bristles at the idea of punishment more than the crime itself. That to me is insane. I think it's insane that anyone should think that there shouldn't be a consequence for an action. This is just common sense. It's um, it's justified, it's fair, and it's also responsible because if you don't punish an offender for an action, it panders to the philosophy that it's all someone else's fault, that it's a fault of society, that it's a fault of parents, that it's always someone else's fault. And it's something that I really have a big problem with regarding the left's attitude to crime. And I'm not talking here about every single left leaning person, but it is something that's characteristic of their philosophy on crime. This is an area where I'm definitely to the right. I call myself a centrist, and I am, but on this subject, I am more to the right because I just think it's the idea that there should be sympathy or leniency for those sort of destructive crimes, it's frankly makes me want to vomit. It infuriates me, quite honestly. And I think that people who take that position, they think that punishment is futile. They really, really don't understand the mental anguish that victims of crime feel. Now, I had experience when I was 16 of being forced from my home by gangs, me and my family. And it was a pretty unpleasant experience. It could have been worse, but it was a pretty unpleasant experience, and it shaped my philosophy on this subject ever since. For the last almost 20 years, it is 20 years now, in fact. It's just had a profound impact on the way I think about this because I know what it's like to have that anxiety and that fear. And it's so good saying, oh, well, I won't have my bike stolen by a thief. That's not the same thing as literally living, um, thinking that every time you leave your house, you could be assaulted. Um, in my case, my family were outsiders, and the house visibly stood out, and it was a close knit community, and all those factors added together. But anyway, to get to the point of this video, more specifically, these two cases which I came across, they were, it was kind of on my recommended list. Like Watch This Now or whatever it was. I think there were localized news stations actually reporting the cases. But one case, they're both from the United States, but I think it would be very easy to find British equivalents. Anyway, one case involves a criminal by the name of Jaime Osuna, and this is in California. If you're from California, you might be familiar with the case. I think it was quite high profile. But basically, this guy was, by his own admission, a sadistic killer. From childhood, he tortured animals. He murdered and tortured a young woman in a hostel type facility, which is what he was jailed for. He then beheaded a fellow inmate. Um, and I think basically he is an example of the sort of inmate, the sort of criminal who, in my opinion, can never be reformed, can never be rehabilitated, even inside, because clearly he's a danger to other inmates. So I think someone like that should be, I think that's a strong case for solitary confinement. Although I think solitary confinement is overused in the United States. I think a case like this, and I'll put a link to the video, I'll warn you, it's disturbing. There's no graphic content, there's no blood or gore, but his words are deeply troubling. And he actually laughed at the victim's family in court. So to me, this guy is demonic, really. And I think that there's cases like that. I don't think that you could ever reform someone like that. Now, the second video is a very different situation because in that case, it's a prison in Georgia. And basically, the warden was having some sort of medical condition, whether it was a heart attack or a stroke or something. Um, I don't know if it was a lower security prison, but basically, he somehow managed to, he could see that the inmates could see what was going on, and I guess he managed to press a button to open their doors. But basically, they knew there was a problem. They were banging on the doors because they could see him slump over, and they knew there was a problem because it was something to do with his hat. I think he either had it off or on or something. But anyway, they knew there was a problem, and they tried their best to get attention. And he managed to get the doors opened, and they rushed to his aid. Now, if you look at this video on the surface, you think it just looks like a prison riot. But what these inmates were actually doing was trying to rush to his aid, and they managed to get on the sound system, the voice system, and alerted his colleagues. And then he was treated, and thankfully he made a full recovery. Um, the inmates were transferred to another prison, but he expressed his gratitude for what they had done. Um, but for me, that's an example of inmates who clearly can be rehabilitated because in this case, in this case, they'd done something they didn't have to do. This was the man who is responsible for, keeping them behind bars, and they basically saved his life. So I think that whatever their crime is, the report didn't specify what they were in jail for. Clearly, they have hope. Clearly, these guys, they have done something wrong in their life, which is why they're in prison, but they have a moral conscience and they saved a man's life. So that should be taken into account when their review comes up, or certainly in the other prison that they were transferred to. I think it was that case they were transferred to another prison. So to me, inmates like that can clearly be rehabilitated if they have that conscience. There's clearly hope there, and it should be explored, encouraged, and they should be given as much help as possible when the time comes for the release. Now, if they committed a serious crime, let's say murder or armed robbery or something, they should serve their sentence. But when the time comes for the release, they should be given as much help as possible to get back to a normal life. I think that's very important. So I'm pro punishment, but I'm also pro rehabilitation when it's appropriate, which is probably most cases. But I think in a case like Jaime Osuna, um, it's chilling. Now, whether there's something off with his head, like there's some sort of criminal DNA, or there's I mean, something just off with someone like that. As far as I know, he wasn't. He's not held in a psychiatric hospital, so he was clearly deemed to be fully aware of his own actions. It's not like he was given mitigating circumstances for not being responsible for his own mental health. But I think some people are just bad. I believe that. I think some people just have a bad streak in them, and I think he's one example. Um, most people. I remember Oliver Stone in the extras of Natural Born Killers. He said everyone has a snapping point, and he was alluding to the fact Stone very much takes a liberal view on crime. I don't agree with him, and because he was saying that everyone has a potential to be Mickey and Mallory, the two characters in that film. I disagree with that. I think that most people have a point of snapping if they're pushed. That's very different than being a career criminal. Now, in the film, the two characters both have very troubled backgrounds, so you could say it's a background circumstance, but that doesn't explain criminals who have relatively stable backgrounds, like the Leopold and Loeb case in Chicago in the 20s, where they kidnapped and murdered a young guy, a boy, in fact, simply to test the police. So, criminologists will, of course, have a take on this, but for, someone, an average person who's not a criminologist or a psychologist, I just look at the common sense aspect. And common sense to me is someone like Jaime Osuna can never be released, ever. Because I don't think that someone like that um, would ever be safe in society. That's why Charles Manson was never granted parole because he showed that he was absolutely insane, or rather, that he could not be trusted to be a stable character on the outside. Now, Jimmy Osuna is by no means a unique case. There are others like that in every country. So, um, yeah, I'm going to put a link to the two cases. You know, judge for yourself. But I basically think if you watch the two videos, they're not very long, so I urge you to watch them, about 3 minutes each. Um, it clearly exemplifies the difference. You have one criminal who is beyond remorse, beyond redemption, who is has no conscience, has no moral conscience, and you have another. We have three guys who have obviously done something bad in their life, but they have a moral conscience, and they have also done something good. So there's hope for them. That's that is significant. So if you do nothing else in this video, just even if you don't listen to me, just watch those links. Significant.